Dear Father in heaven, we thank you, Lord, for, as I was thinking earlier upon the different lines of communication, ways of communicating at the times that a great work was to be done, and the gift of the ability to communicate around the world you provided for us instantly. And we are blessed and thankful, Father, to be able to study this way, to be able to fellowship together, to be able to gain experience, to be able to discuss these prophetic topics and to come to a more fuller understanding. Father, as Daniel prayed for skill and understanding, it is my prayer for us, Father, not just this group that's here tonight, but for this movement. And I pray for this group here in the United States, Lord, that we would each gain skill in understanding. Father, we ask a special blessing upon our sister Tony tonight as she's going to present the message on organization. I pray, Father, that you would give her clarity of thought and clarity of mind. And may we all, Father, continue to grow in understanding of the organization that you are setting up. It is your work, building us to this place where we would truly be all one in your hand, ready for this work. We have a great work to do, Father, with just a few short months to prepare. And I pray that we use our time, Father, in that preparation. So we thank you and we praise you and we ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, we're going to be reading from the camp meeting from Elder Parmenter on organization part 1 and 2.
And can everybody see that first camp meeting, hold the rope?
Yes, I got it.
Okay, thank you.
So this is my first presentation, and in these first presentations, I want to deal with some varying subjects that are not specifically prophetic. So I'm sure all of you by now have received communication from Elder Tess and myself. The subject of the communication was the ordination of Sister Terry. The reason why I bring the subject up is because we want to, at the beginning of the camp meeting, address a particular issue. It has been about 18 months since the movement split. Even before the movement split, without any particular direction from any human agent, it was already quite clear that the movement was being organized in a way that people had not designed, maybe in a way people had not envisioned. Since the split, and perhaps even a little bit before that, the work of organization has been a key thought, an important issue for Elder Tess and me. We recognize that this is a movement that is in its infancy. The movement is 31 years old, so that may surprise you. But those of you who have been in the movement for any length of time, if we were to go back a decade, 10 years, we will know through most of the history of this movement that there has been no organization. We, like the Millerites, have taken a similar course. When William Miller began his work, he had no idea, no will, he had no will to create an organization. In fact, he was proactive in his rejection of organization. He saw his work as being one that would lead people back to, and I will call it the Mother Church. For William Miller, it was the various Protestant denominations. And for this movement, it was the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Sometime after 2014, things began to change. Perhaps in the minds of some, those thoughts had occurred even earlier. So around 2014, as I say, things began to change in our mindset in a remarkably similar way that the mindset of the Millerites changed, the way they identified themselves in comparison to the Protestant churches. So that the work of reorganization began sometime after 2014, And initially it was developing relationships between Future for America and ministries across the world. An important consideration to have in this history is the subject of baptism. Around 2008, 2009, there were some, I will call them leaders, you might just call them teachers. There were some leaders in this movement who were insisting that people needed to be rebaptized. So if you're an Adventist and you join this movement, there was a call for rebaptism. Around that time, there was a clash of ideas, and the argument was over what baptism represented. These teachers had the notion, the idea, to baptize people into a message. So that was one side of the argument. And the other side of the argument were people who said that baptism represents entrance into the kingdom of heaven. So I will simplify. Are you joining a message or are you joining a kingdom? You may not think that there is a big difference between the two, but at the time, those were two powerful arguments, and people took sides. Those who advocated that baptism is the entrance into the kingdom of heaven, they won the argument. And so essentially, around 2009, baptisms ceased to happen. Now, I'm not saying that all the leaders stopped. Some continued, but that work that had begun essentially collapsed. I say a work, but let me rephrase it. This call for baptism died a death. And from 2010, from the next 6 years, there are essentially no baptisms, at least none that were driven by a principle that was prophetic. I think we are all familiar with 2014 and was a watershed moment that we called a turning point, both in the world and in the movement. There was the first major split that occurred, and all those teachers had previously advocated rebaptism, all left the movement. I want to remind us, whether they see it this way or not is irrelevant. But my perspective is that they left the movement because of the rejection of the Sunday law message. And that message was given 2 years prior in 2012. So let us just summarize what we have thus far said. This movement is raised up in 1989. There is no plan to organize. In fact, the plan is to never organize. This is the message that is to go to Adventism. And if you can think about it this way, the premier message that we must give to Adventism is the 2520. Now that is not discovered for many years afterwards. We will put the year 2520 a long time later. The 2520, I wanted us to understand it in this way. It is the key. It is the key that unlocks our history, our message. Our message is simple. The Sunday law is coming. The Sunday law is coming. Jesus is about to return. Now you can't just say that. You have to have some logic, some reason. Now in a movement, we are so focused on 9/11, which we were back in the early history. But I will suggest that it is not the most important tool or idea or doctrine that gets worked out. I'm going to give the date 2004, 3 years after the event. 3 years after the event. It's not that individuals didn't understand before they did, but it becomes an established point then. And what happens the following year? I already gave you the answer. 2005 and the 2520 comes. So these two important tools or concepts or truths are linked together. The reason why this is important is because in 2009, which was the increase of knowledge of the 2520, as you all know, the argument that is used to say that baptisms are wrong is the 2520, is the premier argument. Because the 2520 is what is that truth? It is the scattering, it is a scattering and gathering. And as soon as you start thinking in those terms, these are experiences that someone must go through. And the someone is the same person who is scattered is gathered, not two separate people. So if asceticism is scattered, and what do we call the scattering experience? When I say we, I mean Ellen White. Revelation 3, the Laodicea experience. So we go into a scattering in 1850. When we go into the Laodicea condition, and according to early writing, page 74, the Lord had shown Ellen White that 1850 was meant to be what? The second gathering. But what it turned out to be was a continuation of the second scattering. So it was scattering number 2, part B. We will call it the Laodicea condition. So if we are scattered, then we must be gathered. So you can see the argument that is going to be used now, the argument for no rebaptism. So the 2520 is going to be used as a premier argument against rebaptism. So if you are scattered, you must be gathered. The Seventh-day Adventist Church was scattered. So therefore, the Seventh-day Adventist Church must be gathered. Beginning in 1989. I will say it this way, worked out in 2005. So there are teachers in our movement, unwillingly, that which means they do not know, are teaching false doctrine. What is the false doctrine that they are teaching? That to be saved, you must be baptized into the message. Baptism is not a message. It is into the kingdom. And seeing as there is no new kingdom, you cannot get rebaptized into something else. 2009, one of our premier reasons we have the increase of knowledge on the 2520, 4 years after it was discovered in 2005, is to address the issues of organization. Things continue. 3 years later, 2012, the agitation of the Sunday law begins. That is a waymark. We might call it the loud cry that the Sunday law is coming. It arrives 2 years later in 2014. All those teachers leave, and in the power vacuum, in the teaching vacuum, the movement begins to flourish, and there becomes an eternal awareness that organization must happen. And what is going to
Real quick?
Yeah.
Can you back up just 1 second to the previous paragraph?
Yeah.
I just
Okay.
kept thinking, not you, but her, just to scroll there. So that last paragraph, because I'm just thinking about how we're understanding that 2019 was the increase of knowledge on the line of the 144,000. It's the increase of knowledge of the Sunday law, right?
Right.
So, because in reading that paragraph right there, what he understood in 2012, the agitation of the Sunday law begins. So that was a fractal level that showed the line on the 144,000. I don't know which came first. I think that the 2014 came first, not understanding fully. I want to say not understanding fully Daniel 41 yet, or that the Sunday law, that the stages of the Sunday law, and we didn't have fractals at the time. We didn't know Ezra 7:9. So just interesting because there's that kind of that model right there.
Yeah.
For the line of the 144,000 after we understood fractals. That was all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Okay. Let me see. So a work begins to be done to investigate the requirements, the necessity of baptism. The work is done quietly, privately. It is done here in the UK. So the culmination of that work brings us to the year 2016. And in 2016, the work of organization really begins to take effect. A year before, there was discussion about how ministries should relate one to another. But in 2016, the subject of baptism becomes an issue in this movement. So it is now reorganized that this movement must organize.
Recognize.
Recognize. I recognize?
So it is now recognized that this movement.
So it is now recognized that this movement must be organized. Thank you. I will say in terms that you are all familiar with, Daniel 2, this movement is the stone. We might call it the 144,000. It is the people that are cut out of Adventism. Ellen White describes this group in different ways, but the way she writes is interesting. You know that Ellen White is what I will call a conference leader, a regular church leader. And so when she writes about the split or the division in Adventism, she speaks about it in two ways. We, meaning her, and the good people, or just them, the good people. And because we know Ellen White is good, we would associate the good people with her. The way she writes, I say this carefully, is deceptive because we do not think clearly, slowly. If we remember the fast brain, Ellen White is a conference leader, which we will call it the church. She is good. Therefore, in her models, in her visions, when she talks about the good people and the bad people, what you see is all there is. The church must be the good people. And so what happens is, what we do not fully realize is that the conference structure is to be destroyed. In fact, we ignore information that is right in front of our eyes, like the Reformation, the history of Christ. The ecclesiastical authorities never accept the truth. In plain words, that means the conference structure will not accept. So what we begin to find is that this movement, which is small, insignificant, nothing, ends up being this group that Ellen White identifies in her writings. The way she writes will trick you. She describes it as some large, powerful organization, not a few hundred disgruntled Adventists. All this begins to come together in 2015. And by 2016, the idea was crystallized. The same people that were fighting against baptism in 2009 are the same people that are going to advocate for it now. They won in 2009. It was too early to organize. And they win in 2016, same people. Now they are going to say, you must organize, also known as you must re-baptize, because now it is understood and now it is conceptualized. Is that how I say it? Conceptualized.
Yeah.
The models are clear. Because of Ezra 7, that story opens for us the truth. Not that we can organize, but we are required to organize. But this is a group of people that are coming out of Babylon. So this movement now reorganizes. It must organize itself. The stone, it must also recognize that Adventist church, the mountain, is destroyed. And so rebaptism or baptisms are now brought to the forefront. In God's order, the baptisms will take another 2.5 years before they would begin. But what happens in 2016 is the work of ordaining elders begin. And that is also an interesting story, how certain people were selected and others were put aside. I know people have their own theories, their own ideas, but it was not an engineered as people may think. So what happened then, connected with the work of ordination, was also the work of reorganization. That's a strange way of saying it because the movement had not really been organized properly before. So we're three members who were ordained. So there were three members who were ordained, and they were given three geographical areas. We will call them three continents. These were the continents where most of the movement resided. Now there were some gaps. In fact, there were two gaps. One was the United States, and one was Oceania or Australia. And those were not dealt with. One of them was ignored, and the other one was not even thought of properly. So we see in 2016, we have the beginning of organization. From 2016 to 2019, rapid progress begins to be made in this work of reorganization. I'll call it reorganization. Technically, it's not, but I say it that way to make it a point. When I want to portray what I want to portray to you is that what is happening in those 3 years is an attempt to correct the mistakes and the ignorance of the past. You're all familiar that in the midst of that history, the Midnight Cry message comes, and it culminates in 2019 with the complete separation of FFA in this movement. At that moment in the summer of 2019, the organizational structure that is going to take us through to Panhim is already settled. It is settled, but it is not formalized, and it is not publicly or openly discussed. I have discussed this concept before, the one I'm going to say now. When you look at an object, if you look at it from a different perspective, it looks or appears different. I did it with a graphic showing the cylinder and the shadow that it casts. And I think this resonated with the people in the movement. And I think the fellowship in California has it either part of their logo or part of their periodic pictorial artwork on their fellowship website. The reason I mention that is because there are different perspectives of why there was a separation in 2019. So when I give this perspective, it does not nullify or destroy other perspectives. So I want to say this. The reason the separation occurred in 2019 is because of those two areas that had not been addressed before, Oceania and the United States. Those two areas, because of the catalyst for the separation to occur, the one that is the most obvious, the easy one to see, is the United States. So what happens in 2019 is that the United States begins to be reorganized. And the result of organizational model is one that Future for America simply finds unacceptable. Perhaps I should not even say Future for America, because at that time, technically, I was the boss or the leader of Future for America. So perhaps it might be appropriate to say there was a coup. So Future for America had been legitimately taken over by the movement, and that was me, and then very quickly, Elder Tess. And what happened, and what happens is a coup. The generals of Future for America want to take it back. And so, in this perspective that I've given today, in parentheses, there are others. The reason why there is a separation in the movement is because of the work of organization, because the United States had not been organized properly before. It came suddenly as an overwhelming surprise, and what they saw, they did not like. We are having those concerns today in our movement, in certain areas, and certain individuals, certain groups. They do not like what they see. When I say see, I mean what the organization that they see, and they want to reject it. So what are we going through today? It's not something new. This is what 2016 was. So the United States has never been properly organized. So we come in, the new leaders. In English, they say with a heavy hand. Maybe if you do not know what that means, with a hammer. So we come with force, no persuasion, no argument. We tell them that this is how it will be. We do not consult, and it is so surprising, so shocking, they leave. I would suggest that the United States had been organized, I will say properly, but I mean better in the past. The crisis in 2019 would not have happened. So people in Africa thought that FFA was the movement. Maybe others thought the same, and that was the problem. Future for America thought they were the movement as well. And that's why I call it a coup. They did not like the new management, and they definitely did not like our management style. So the separation occurs because of organization. That is the point I want us to see. That was 18 months ago. You want to mark September, a little less than 18 months. Since then, by and large, the structure of the movement has not changed. We have had to make some adjustments. But what I want us to do at this camp meeting, before I discuss any other issue, I want to take this opportunity to describe our understanding of what the organization of the movement looks like today, to formalize it, if you like. Now, we might ask, why now? My answer would be this: God's ways are mysterious. They are beyond our understanding. But I think we can all see, now that we have come out of the 40 days, now the upper room experience is beginning, heading to the outpouring of the Holy Spirit. Pentecost, which is the formalization of the message, it doesn't seem surprising to me that the organization would also be formalized. I think we all need to be humble enough to recognize that the movement that we have today is almost certainly, it is not going to look the same in 5 years' time. So when I talk about the formalization of the structure, it must be understood dispensational. And I don't mean in a 144 dispensation. I mean in a similar dispensation, in a smaller dispensation. What we are describing now is what the structure will look like going into Panium. And it seems appropriate to God and us to publicly explain, to formalize what the structure looks like. Like any formalization, it should not come as a surprise, because you know the formalization of the message is not a new message. It is a pre-explanation or formalization of an existing truth. So if you have been looking, thinking, you already know that the organization, what the organization looks like. So it should not come as a surprise, but there may be just some small refinements or details that you are not aware of. Elder Tess and I recognize that our current structure is not perfect. I don't want to say it has faults, but it does have weaknesses. And as time goes on, we believe that those weaknesses or cracks will get fixed. You all know that Sister Terry from Australia is to be ordained this week. And we, Elder Tess and I, consider this to be the final piece of the puzzle, the final step in organization before we come to the midnight cry to Panium. And because we see it this way, we want to take an opportunity to describe the organizational structure as we understand it today. So what we have discussed in this presentation is a short summary of organization and how two key ideas were connected to that: baptism and the 2520. Without those two, we would not have understood the organization properly. I have given you key dates: 2004, 2005, 2009, 12, 14, 16, 19, and then this year, 2020. At this camp meeting is, I think, significant because it connects or links between the 2 years, 20 and 21. So we discussed the organizational structure as we have it in 2020. In fact, it is the same organization structure that we had in 2019. Nothing has changed. And then the final church touch, the final piece of the puzzle, we will put into place next year in 2021. But that is only a few days away, as you all know. Next year, the Sabbath, that is when we will have the ordination of the final elder, the final organizational elder, at least in our current understanding. Now, Lord willing, that does not mean I will this. Now, Lord willing, that does not mean I will this, does not mean I want this. I mean, if he wills it, we may have further organization before Panium. And you will understand what I mean when we discuss the details. But that will be for him to decide. But also for us to pray for, because the Lord is not deaf to our entreaties. So that is a summary of what we have discussed. In my next presentations, I want to lay out on the board what the structures look like, some of the weaknesses or cracks in the structure, so we can all understand where we are today. Okay, so now I'm going to go on to the next one. Can't meet the
Okay.
second.
Give me a second. I'll bring that one up.
Okay,
Thanks.
you're welcome.
Where'd it go? Wednesday. Today's okay. I'm in the wrong month. There we go. 13th. Sometimes I'm too organized for my own good.
You might be better organized than me.
But my organization, I'm so organized, I have a hard time finding things.
Oh, yeah, I do that myself.
Yeah. Let's see. Here we go. Right there. Okay. Can you see the third camp meeting? Hold the rope.
Yep.
Awesome.
All right. So it's nice to be back.
Thanks for the nice break.
I know. You will all recall that yesterday we were discussing the subject of organization. I spent quite some time going through the history, explaining the developments of organization over the past 30 years, particularly beginning around 2001. And you will remember we went through a number of key dates. You remember, hopefully, that we spoke about the separation last year in 2019. And from the perspective of this study, we organized, hopefully, that the cause of the separation was organization. And so you remember that there were two key areas that had not been organized properly: the United States and Oceania. And in the summer of last year, June or July, the work of organizing the United States began. And in this narrative, this story, the cause of the separation was the result of FFA rejecting organization. Over the past 18 months, we have been slowly but surely refining the organization of the movement. In many ways, our current organizational model was given to us by God. And what I mean by that it was not premeditated by human design. I explained that there were two key results or truths that help us to address organization. The first was baptism, and the
Yeah.
second was, huh?
Sorry.
Okay. The first was baptism, and the second was the 2520. Now, I know in the movement, we do not speak a lot about the 2520, but if you go through the movement, but if you go through the public record, there are tens, if not close to 100 hours of material on that subject. And if you did not want to go back to the previous material or wanted to listen to a new speaker on the subject, I can recommend a nice series. It has been done by Sister Catherine from Australia. You should be able to find it on the Midnight Watch YouTube channel. Sister Catherine has done a review of the 2520, but obviously in her own words, from her own perspective. And if there are any of you that want a refresher in that subject, I can recommend that series. They are not all together. They have been done over a series of months. So the idea of baptism comes into the movement in 2016. And it is 2.5 years later when people begin to get baptized. Now, connected to baptism back in 2016 was organization. And it was decided, remember, there were people who opposed baptism in 2009. The same people pushed or promoted baptism in 2015 and 2016. And in both eras, they were successful. They prevailed. They pushed for a third step or a third point. So if the movement was to be organized, it needed recognizable leaders. Now, up to that point, the various ministries of fellowship leaders across the world had all grown up organically, which means that they came to prominence because of their own hard effort, their own interest in the message. I think this is a little lesson for us right there in this paragraph right there. I say this positively. They were self-appointed. They came to prominence naturally. Hence, in English, we say they were organic in their own rise to power. Now, if we wanted to develop organization, this party proposed the following plan. In fact, it was not just a proposal. They said it was necessary that organization had to happen this way. And the way is what I am going to describe next. We needed to appoint leaders in the movement, as opposed to them of being self-appointed. So people could not rise to position of responsibility by themselves any longer. There was a problem to this. Maybe calling it a problem is not the correct way of expressing it. Up to that moment, there was only one recognized leader of the movement, one person that everybody trusted and that they looked up to, and that was Elder Jeff Pippinger. And therefore, the party proposed to him, counseled him, and the only way forward was for him to appoint those leaders, and he had to do it openly, publicly. So simply put, up to that moment, anybody could be a ministry leader. And all you need to do is live in your own country and start up a group. And by, you would be recognized and acknowledged as a local leader. But for proper organization, a new plan had to be devised. Now, Elder Jeff would have to appoint leaders. And we are not just talking about leaders at a lower level. We are talking about a large structural changes in the movement. So essentially, we will get to the world and divide it into portions. Now, this movement does not accurately represent the whole world yet. At that time, 2016, up to the present day, we cover 5 continents. And I know that Canada and the United States are considered one continent, but for the purpose of our discussion, we will keep them separate. And if we were to do that, there would be 6. So the areas are South America, North America in two parts, the United States and Canada, Africa, Europe, Oceania. So that's 5 or 6, depending on how you count. So for the purpose of our discussion, we are going to consider Canada and the United States as separate. And you will remember that I said there were 2 areas that were not organized properly, the United States and Oceania. The other parts of the world were divided up and leaders were appointed to take care of those regions. Now, the idea of pre-planning and providence, the relationship between planning and providence is complex, far beyond my understanding. Remember, when we approach a story, an event, we can see it from different perspectives. So you can argue the point that some of this was designed, it was engineered, and it was designed by this party. And yet, Providence was doing his work. What could not have been known to this party who was beginning to steer and engineer organization? I'll just pause for a moment. I want to say formalize the organization that had already begun. Brother Mark Bruce, and I'm not sure if everybody knows that name, he was one of the key people beginning in 2012 that steered the movement into this organizational direction. You remember that he was one of our most important or premier teachers after the split. In 2014, we are at the beginning of 2006. Oh, let me say that again. A premier teacher after the split in 2014. We are at the beginning of 2016 now, and this party wants to organize, to begin to be formalized. And what they could never have envisioned, never planned, was that when those discussions were happening, that Brother Mark Bruce was not there at those meetings. He was away on a mission trip. And I would argue that that was not engineered. It was not designed. It was providential. Within 12 months, he would leave the movement. So when the work of organization was being discussed, I would say providentially, there were key speakers, key teachers that were in the United States at that time, all at the same place, except Mark Bruce. The meeting began, and this party made the following point. For these leaders to be acknowledged, to be recognized, they would have to be anointed. There would have to be some public demonstration to the movement about who and what these people were that was readily agreed. And 3 people were ordained in that time period, Brother Tabo, Brother Marco, and myself. And each of these people were assigned a region in the world. Brother Marco, South America. Me, Europe. Brother Tabo, Africa and Canada. So that was readily agreed. And what we had then connected to that event was what I will call the first recognized, the first authorized, the first legitimate, recognized, organized, legitimate. So that was the first baptism that we had in the movement. I do not mean to say that it was the first year. I am saying it was the first in the new era. And this was long time before 2018, before the work of baptism began. So an ordination service is organized in 2016. Those 3 members are ordained as elders in the movement. At the early stage, I want us to recognize how many gaps there were. One of the most glaring and obvious problems that we had was those 3 individuals were ordained by other men in the movement. Now, I'm sure that we will all acknowledge that Elder Jeff was the right person to do that work. But is, but in its wisdom, or I should really say, in the lack of wisdom, no, I'll say this in a different way. So, in the lack of wisdom that Elder Jeff had, FFA had, the local ministry in the United States had, essentially the glorious Lamb. They saw it fit against all reason to allow members who had previously been ordained as elders in a conference church to retain their title, their authority, when they joined this movement. And this was never allowed anywhere else, only in the glorious Lamb. And it's issue such as this that eventually caused the implosion, the destruction, the fragmentation of the work in the United States. The leadership today has now officially formalized this issue that we're forbidden to call people elder unless they were ordained in this movement. There are some people in the movement today, when this issue was addressed this year, found it difficult, found it offensive against their cultural norms. What they did not realize is that if you go back 4 years, this idea of calling non-ordained members elders back in 2016 was the beginning of the end for, I'm going to call it, for the United States. If you want to be specific, for Future for America. If you want to be more specific, for the local fellowship, Lambert Church, that many of you are aware of. And because of the work in the United States was not cleaned up, like a wound, it was allowed to fester and become septic. And almost all of those people in leadership positions have left the movement since then. So I want to point out the fact that even from the very beginning, the way the organization started was not done correctly, legally, and yet it was done. And I believe it had God's authorization or its signature upon that work. In weakness, in our frailty, in our humanity, humanity, even with that, plus I want to call it our rebellion, because we should have known better, and we did. Even in our weaknesses, those who are too weak to call sin by its right name, yet God mysteriously God's mysterious work went forward. And in 2016 really marks the beginning of the organizational structure that we currently have today. And as I say, Brother Mark Bruce providentially, and I believe it was providentially, was not there during those discussions. At least one other person whose name came up in those discussions to be ordained was also not there. And both that person and Brother Mark Bruce have both left the movement. This is why I see God's hand in this work. I just want to add one point here, which is out of sequence. In English, there are terms or phrases that we have, as in most languages. Often they are ugly statements or they are ugly phrases, not flattering. The first one is called a yes, ma'am. I don't know if you have something in your language that equates to that. When the boss tells you to do something, even if you don't agree, you just say, yes, sir. You might call it a puppet or a marionette, someone who is controlled by someone else. Another way of expressing it in English is that you are in the person's pocket. So I told you that the two people that should or could have been there were not ordained and have left the movement. The three that were ordained have remained in the movement. Now, the reason I mentioned that, if I take myself out of this equation or this problem, it leaves two other people, Brother Marco and Tabo. And the reason I mention them, I don't know how many of us are aware of this, but Elder Jeff considered them to be in his pocket, to be his yes men, because he had developed strong ties with these people. I think it is fair to say that he considered them to be like his sons. Elder Marco, he has known for the longest time. Elder Tabo, the youngest, was really like Elder Jeff's son. And the reason I mention that is because when the separation happened last year, when Elder Jeff clicked his fingers, and I hope you know what that means, he was expecting both of those two people to run to him, click his finger, and they would come running to him. That is what he expected. We are late in August 2019. Elder Tess is now an organized leader in the movement.
Recognized.
Recognized. Oh, what did I say? No, I lost me.
Organized.
Oh, organized.
But it's recognized.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? Okay. Elder Tess is now an organized leader in the movement.
Recognized.
Correct. That's what I had there. And then you said organized.
No, I know. Yeah, you said organized. So for some reason, you're getting those
Oh.
two words mixed up tonight.
Oh, okay, but they're okay. I'll be more careful. Let me start right here.
Okay.
We are in late August 2019. Elder Tess is now a recognized leader in the movement, and neither she nor I said anything to Elder Marco or Tabo. We never encouraged them nor discouraged them. We were left completely to make their own decision. We believe that there is enough power in this message to hold you firm. What Elder Jeff did not realize, slowly, visibly, not me, the Lord, had been building a firm platform. He had been doing that for the previous 5 years, 2014 to 2019. And he did not know, maybe Elder Marco and Tabo did not know, that they had, without realizing it, stood or joined onto that firm platform. Now I say it that way because I want to make the following point, that there were two buildings being constructed. If you go back to maybe 2016, 2017, and 2018, it becomes public that there are two sets of disciples. I hope you appreciate parables. There were the disciples of John, and there were the disciples of that other man. And history was repeating in this very movement. Two groups of disciples had formed. I never spoke about that. It was John himself and his disciples that pointed this out. History repeats. If you go back to maybe and history was repeating in this very movement. Two groups of disciples had formed. I never spoke about it. It was John himself and his disciples that pointed this out. Let me see. If you go back and check the public record between John, that man, John's disciple, his disciple was John, and John's disciple, that were doing all the public arguing and questioning, and the man remained silent. As it was then, so it is now. Being a good person, the man never said anything. Like someone who does plastering, he keeps on covering up the cracks until an earthquake and the whole structure fell. During that history, two buildings are being constructed. What I want us to see, you cannot see unless you go back into history to those invisible structures as they were being built by those two. I'm going to call it parties, those two parties. When you do construction work, you have a bricklayer, someone who does bricks, someone who does carpentry work with wood. And there are people who get cement, make it into plaster, and spread it across the walls, plastering. Two groups, two parties, two buildings. If you wanted to know how you could identify the two groups, what is so interesting is the following. Now, not all of you are there. Not all of you are there. Not all of you paid attention. But I know Sister Charmaine and Elder Maurice noticed this. And what they noticed was the following. If you went to the board and you looked at the artwork of the building between the two parties was different. Graphically, they constructed their temples differently. This was like a red light that was flashing a warning. You, myself, and those two people I have mentioned discussed this. They noticed that the graphics, the models were different. The best I could do was offer a smile and move on. Now remember, those two brothers were considered by Elder Jeff to be his men. How would he know that? Because their artwork was the same as his artwork, different to mine, and nothing was said. But as I said, slowly but steadily, those two buildings were being constructed. And I would argue that my model wasn't even a building, it was a platform. I want to tell you something, that this model that I had in 2016, 2017, and 18, because when it first came up, what year? 2009. In 2009, I'm discussing this model as a baby. I'm discussing this model as a baby because I don't know my left hand from my right. And guess what happens to me? I get snapped. I was told I am teaching heretical statements, that I don't know my foundation from my pillars. I accepted the rebuke and never spoke about it, maybe for about 6 years. I don't discuss the building or the temple for 6 years, plus or minus. But it turns out that early model was correct. And it only gets laid out thoroughly, properly, I think, in 2018. So it is connected to the two charts, 1844 and 1850. Specific Ellen White quotes that you can put together. You can show that the 1840 chart is the foundation of the firm platform, of the foundation. It is the firm platform upon which we stand. And what was the most hurtful thing for Elder Jeff was that the people he thought were on his platform with him, Elder Marco and Talbot, somehow or another, in the English, they say jumped ship. They jumped from his platform onto, I don't want to call it mine, onto the movement's platform somehow. And I don't mean this in a silly way, because they had to be faithful. They recognized that they were standing on sinking sand. And last year, they left that and stood on the firm platform. And that personal hurt that Elder Jeff experienced was too much. He never really recovered from that. I mention that because I want us to see how firm our platform is, our movement is. So I want to add 2 more pieces of information. This story is more than just drawing a family tree on a board and showing you names and geography. I want us to see how this work of organization has grown like a mushroom. It blossomed invisibly. 2 points, 2 people. I met Elder Jeff in 2005. I want to express it this way, and I think could speak on behalf of Elder Marco and Tabo, that I developed a personal friendship with Elder Jeff. So this personal friendship began to grow from 2005 onward. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, Future for America is not Elder Jeff Pippinger. It is a group of people. And not everybody viewed me in the same way. But what I want to say is that from an exceedingly early stage, I developed a connection with him, a personal and organizational connection that just grew stronger and stronger year by year. Now, that's the other area that has had difficulties, Oceania. And in that area of the world, I too developed a connection that was back in 2011, 10 years ago. So I made a personal connection there, which over the recent past has also developed organizationally. I mention all this history because I want to lay a foundation for us so that you can be sure of several things. Even though human beings are involved in this organization, we make decisions. Sometimes they are good decisions and sometimes they are not good decisions. But what I want to point out is no matter how influential we humans are, and we are influential, God's ways are past finding out. I quoted from scripture. It means that we cannot understand God's plan. He has his own ideas. And if we try to do this strange work, some strange work, he just has a way of getting his will done. And I want us to see, in case you have any doubts today, and moving forward, you ask, why have you, Tess and Parminder, made these silly decisions? Who gave you these ideas? I don't want to say God did. I wouldn't be so bold, so presumptuous. But what I would say is, don't worry. If you see wisdom, good. If you don't, if you have doubt, don't fear. Because God is in control of this work, not us. Even when we get false elders doing the work, God will fix it. Even if two parties develop, God will control it. Even if you find yourself not only building, but standing on the wrong platform. By the way, some of you have heard, that's my dog. God has a way to get you off seeking sound and come on to the platform, the firm platform. I am assuming, of course, that this is the right place to be. And I don't do that based upon my theology. I say that based upon one fact, which is fact, that this platform has been built by the messenger of the Midnight Cry. And I have confidence in the way that she has constructed this platform because it is an argument and fits with everything that has happened in the past. So theologically, doctrinally, I stand with her. And if you today are on the wrong side, and some of you listening are, or you know someone that is, there is hope for them. I only mention these two people, Elder Marco and Tabo, and I hope they don't mind me mentioning their names. They are prominent enough, famous enough to be able to take that, but they are not the only people that were followers of Elder Jeff on the wrong side. From 2000, from 15 to 2019, there were large swathes of the movement who followed him, and I would call it his disciples. And nearly every single one of those people who came into this movement because of doctrine, not because of personal ties, left him and came onto the right side of the argument. Don't be in this movement because you're friends with me or you like Elder Tess, because you will be in trouble. You need to be here because of doctrine. And then whatever happens, you will be safe and saved. So in our next presentation, we will lay out the family tree and organizational structure. Most of it should be straightforward, but we will explain some idiosyncrasies or some refinement depending on how you look at it, so that we are all clear in the direction that I believe the Lord is leading us in. That's the end of my presentation.
Really nice review. No
Yeah,
board work. You didn't have board work yet on this one.
No, no board article at all.
that would be on the next one after, I guess.
Yeah,
That was interesting going through that history as well. Because we came in when Mark Bruce was still around.
I know. I picked him up from the airport.
That's right. You
Wow.
and Dwayne Dewey, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you drove him to Quincy.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right. That was the time.
Him and the other guy. Who was the other guy? Who was the other guy? Huh?
Dwayne Dewey.
Dwayne. Yeah, Dwayne.
Yeah, you drove them both to Quincy.
Yeah. Mhm.
And then I met you in Quincy
Right.
when that terrifying drive up there.
I know. Well, I don't mind it.
Just that quick passage of that section right before right before you pull into Quincy, it was a major downpour thunderstorm.
Right.
I was,
The weather was bad.
my hands were like they were pinned onto the steering wheel by the time I got to where they were at.
Right.
So yeah, that was interesting history to go through that.
Yeah.
Because we were just coming in and these guys were all part of everything and we had no
Right.
idea. Actually, at the time we had no idea of any of this that was going on.
Exactly.
We were brand new in the movement.
I can see us probably being on the same side with Marco and elders Marco and Tebo, because we were leaning that way. We were listening to Jeff. We didn't even know who Elder Parmenter was.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I could
We could have fallen off just as easily, we just been,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
we just been blessed to be guided.
Yeah, I think like what Elder Parmenter is saying, we went to the right side because we believed in the message.
Amen.
It wasn't that we knew anything or whatever, we just knew that it was the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. And some of the things that Elder Jeff was saying they just were convoluted, and we are just like scratching our heads, and it's like, okay, well, that's what he's saying, but I'm not getting it. And when we heard Elder Tess and Parmenter, just everything fell into place.
It's like clarity opened up.
Yeah, exactly.
And we didn't make sense. Clarity opened up.
You know what it was like? It was like a hard saying, who could hear it, right?
Yeah.
And then we're like the little children who say, well, whatever God says, we will do, right?
Yeah.
And that's what it was.
Yeah.
Amen.
I'm very thankful to have come through that transition, and we have a transition coming up to pass through as well.
Amen. Yeah. We just keep praying for each other that we'll all be on that right side.
Yeah.
Well, the elders are really giving us hope, like in this one right here, just you're on the right side, you will make it, you know what I mean? You get that hope. And that's what I'm living for, that's what I'm going on ever since I got my counsel and stuff like that. Not so much counsel, but it was just simple words that Elder Shaqueta had given me from the elders, and it was just simple words that just eased my heart, and so I don't have such heart pains anymore about what's going to happen to me. It's in God's hands, and I'm not going to quit it. I'm not going to stop. None of us are, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So then that's just the point.
Amen.
Yeah.
Really nice study. So I think Sister Donna's up on Sabbath, huh?
Yeah. It's did I have that
Two
open?
of them, and then I'm not until the week after.
Jimmy, open it up.
I'm on the 6th, and I'm not till March.
Let's close in
Say
prayer
prayer.
first
Mhm.
before we do that.
Okay.
Do you want to close in prayer, Sister Christine?
Sure. Dear Father in heaven, we thank you so much for allowing us to gather together in fellowship. We thank you also for allowing us to review the organizational structure that you taught us through Elder Parmenter. And we're so grateful, so very, very grateful that you worked through us in our hearts and our thoughts and helped us to stay on the movement platform, that you didn't allow us to fall away. that you helped us to see the truth, and you helped us to walk through that and stay on the right side. We do pray that everyone here, everyone in the movement now, will stay in the coming trials, the coming test. We pray that you will help us all to make the right choices, to understand your truth, to hold on tight, for our lives are at stake. And we pray that you'll help us to make good decisions throughout each and every day and have a compassionate, loving, merciful heart for the souls of others, and work with you and work through you, and help us uh, to be like you, to have a character like yours. And we pray all this in the name of our Lord and Savior, Yeshua. Amen.
Amen.